Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming back again. This is Ken Shoulders number 53. And today we're going to do something pretty cool. It's called the New Philadelphia Experiment. And it's something that Tim Ventura and Dr. Ron Milon, I might be saying that wrong, a paper that was done in 2006. And I did a couple days ago, I visited Paul Harris's laboratory, and which is just amazing. And we had a really awesome discussion about actually trying to recreate the Philadelphia experiment. So we've got a lot of the stuff that's necessary already there, I think, for the most part. Plus, we'd also like to maybe even get John up if it's possible. So thanks, Chip, and everyone. Here we go.
All right, the New Philadelphia Experiment, Dr. Ron Milioni, maybe,
Yeah.
on Philadelphia Experiment Replication, 2006 publication date. Starts off with italics. In 1994, Dr. James Coram succeeded in making a block of iron invisible to radar, thereby demonstrating the feasibility of the Philadelphia Experiment. 12 years later, BAE, big company, radar specialist Dr. Don Milioni is not only planning a larger scale replication of the Coram experiment, but that he's going to add a bit of magic through a dream team collaboration with the legendary John Hutchinson. Oh, this sounds good already.
Yeah, it's very cool.
AAG. Let's start out with a big announcement. First, you've been working with John Hutchinson to plan a highly public replication of Philadelphia experiment in August. Can you give a bit of insight into what you're planning? Milioni or Milione. Thanks, Tim. It goes without saying that John Hutchinson and I are both very excited about the experiment we're planning for this summer. We're planning to recreate the so-called Philadelphia experiment. Before I begin, I would like to summarize to the audience what the Philadelphia experiment allegedly was. Supposedly, in the fall of 1943, a U.S. Navy destroyer was made invisible and teleported from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to Norfolk, Virginia, in an incident that later came to be known as the Philadelphia experiment. To provide you with a bit of background info, the Philadelphia experiment was allegedly conducted by the Navy during World War II for the purposes of learning how to absorb radar so as to not allow reflections from enemy radar pulses impinging on the ship target to be returned. The report effects of this experiment were so dramatic and startling that it is supposed that this is why the Navy consistently denies that any such experiments ever took place. Supposedly, not only were radar waves absorbed, but the ship became invisible at ordinary light wavelengths. It's a picture of the USS Eldridge there, DE-170, the former destroyer escort. It's now part of the Greek Shipping Corporation. All right. According to the accounts of Carlos Allende in the Allende letters written to UFO researcher Morris Jessup in the early 1950s, the ship was teleported to another location approximately 150 miles away, then reappeared at the original location a few minutes later. Subsequently, it was found that the crew suffered strange and severe deleterious effects, including a propensity to vanish into thin air. It's even been said that when the ship reappeared, some of the crew members were bodily embedded into the hull of the ship. Yeah, I've heard that
Yeah,
one.
that would be deleterious.
Yeah, and one thing that most people don't know is it was one of the Cameron brothers. There's three of them actually, and one of them was embedded in the ship. I read that, or I saw that when Al Belix was talking about stuff.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Among many other things, Allende claimed that the greenish fog or mist appeared around the vessel during the experiment. Then a hole in the water appeared, outlining where the hull would have been were it visible. In 1994, the Coram brothers, K.L. Coram and J.F. Coram, PhD, and GFX Down PhD, wrote an account of the theoretical experimental processes relevant to this subject, which is entitled, in quotes, Tesla's Egg of Columbus, Radar Stealth, and the torsion tensor, and the Philadelphia experiment.
Mm.
Well, that covers about everything. All
Mhm.
right. Their experiment depicted below seems to indicate that at least radar wave absorption is possible with a fairly simple electromagnetic configuration, and that, excuse me, that a displacement effect occurred with salt water subjected to a similar field that was also observed. They also comment that the Navy had known about these effects at the time. It appears they must have. It would have been irresponsible of them not to at least investigate with small-scale experiments. Therefore, their consistent denials that such experiments ever took place do not seem believable. John Hutchinson, this is in yellow, emphasized, John Hutchinson and I think that not only can the Philadelphia experiment be tracked to statements which Tesla published during World War I, but that the physics of the experiment can actually be traced back to Tesla's investigation of the rotating magnetic field. Furthermore, to us, it appears to be a legitimate link between Tesla's rotating fields and the torsion sensor, which appears in Dr. Einstein's 1927-1929 Unified Field Theory publications.
Mhm.
Unifying EM and magnetic fields. Okay, before we describe the upcoming experiment in detail, I'd like to provide you with some background information on Tesla coil theory. In yellow, in a Tesla coil, line voltage is stepped up by the high voltage transformer to a magnitude sufficient to charge the capacitor and force the spark gap to break down. This action is repeated at the 60 hertz line frequency. Efficient energy transfer is enhanced by choosing a capacitor whose impedance is equal to that of the secondary winding.
Mm.
Oh, devil's
That's-
in the details.
Yeah.
Essentially, the capacitor and Tesla coil primary form one pair of tank circuits, or LC circuits. When the spark gap arcs, the momentary short circuit dumps the capacitor's charge. Momentary short circuit that is created dumps the capacitor's charge into the coil's primary very fast. The resulting LC circuit rings as a charge oscillates back and forth between the capacitor and the coil. The oscillations decrease in amplitude as the charge is dissipated by resistance. The ringing generates what is referred to as a damped wave. The next half cycle at 60 hertz recharges the capacitor, starting the process of a new train of high-frequency waves, spaced at 60 hertz intervals, which are the product. In yellow, resonance must be achieved to affect ringing. This demands the capacitor and the primary have the same reactance, XL equals XC. Circuit resistance, capacitor, coil, and intermediate wiring limits the overall efficiency of the tank circuit. The circuit resistance, capacitor, coil, intermediate wiring limits the overall efficiency of the tank circuit. Efficiency is rated in terms of quality factor represented by Q. Q is WL over R equals XC over R. Increasing resistance reduces Q, thereby reducing efficiency. Okay. The effect is minimized by winding the primary with a few turns of heavy conductor, well spaced, over a large radius form. The larger the better. Capacitor size and construction also bear upon Q. The physical size and area should be minimized. Interesting. This, however, works, going on to the next page. This, however, works against large capacitance values and dictates the coil be wound with more turns. The goal then is to achieve a workable range of component specifications rather than to strive for overly close tolerances. Coils are often wound with tapped primaries to facilitate fine tuning. In yellow, the secondary coil is situated both electrically and physically within the primary. The secondary and its discharge electrode, generally a sphere or a toroid, make up the second tuned circuit. The winding supplies inductance, capacitors created by the electrode, and the earth ground plane. Air is the dielectric. Most Tesla coils employ secondary quarter wavelength at their operating frequencies. The resonant frequency is quarter wavelength.
Yeah.
This establishes a configuration with maximum current at 0 voltage with minimum current at the electrode. Situation proves to be beneficial in that it enhances coupling with the high current primary, avoids arcing between the primary and secondary, and generates the desired high voltage at the top end. The outing coil is a half-wave variation on the Tesla coil. It possesses the essential Tesla coil operational characteristics, but it employs a horizontally placed secondary with discharge electrodes at both ends and a primary at the center. The outing primary sometimes is merely a pair of taps on the secondary, an auto transformer. The half-wave arrangement affords a coil with maximum discharge at each end and a virtual ground at the midpoint of the windings. I do not think it is too extravagant to claim that the method of the tensor calculus is only possible means of studying the conditions of the world which are at the basis of physical phenomena. During the course of our upcoming experiment this summer, the investigation of the Philadelphia experiment, we will examine the hypothesis that quantum mechanical spin, such as found in ferromagnetic materials, may affect the structure of space-time.
That's so important. Yeah, right there, right?
That one should be in yellow, Ed.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt.
Okay. AAG, I'd like to ask a bit more about the timing. August is still a long ways off. I'm wondering what prompted you to tentatively pick the second week of August to attempt this replication. Million, the reason for the mid-August timeframe is to give John and myself plenty of lead time for a few major milestones. One of these milestones is the construction of a model iron ship, which will require approximately 2 months of work to complete. It's obviously a scale model, measuring only 6 feet 1/50th in length compared to the original 308 feet of the Eldridge. In John's case, he needs time to get the right equipment ready, especially the power supplies, degaussing coils, radar systems, PPI suite and PPI scope systems, etc.
I wonder if John knows where that replica is, because maybe we could use it,
Oh, hell yes. Good idea.
right?
All right. AAG. When most people hear Philadelphia experiment replication, they begin to get a bit nervous. If you live in Vancouver, BC, I imagine they'd be feeling quite a bit more nervous since that's the location where you're planning on conducting the test. Experiment that you're planning isn't a full-blown replication of the fabled 1943 experiment, right? What is this experiment going to consist of, and how will you know if it's a success? Million, you're right about the smaller scale experiment. Our experiment will be a greatly scaled down version of the original experiment for a number of reasons. The main reason is due to public safety. We don't want to endanger any public personnel because of the next page of the experiment. It will happen outside, and we cannot afford to have a mishap with the potential for property and personal damage. The experiment will consist of an actual small ship modeled after the Eldridge, which will consist of small degaussing coils in the model and a power source to start. We're going to have ferromagnetic substances in the model immersed in an external magnetic field will become strongly magnetized in the direction of the impressed field, and which will exhibit retention and hysteresis. In this method, we are in agreement that the ferromagnetic materials mu, which is a nonlinear function of the applied magnetic field H, with dust continuity, which exhibits an incident wave that enters without reflection, such as radar absorption. Let that one sink in a moment.
Mhm.
The velocity of the wave is reduced, and large attenuation occur in a short distance. We will determine that the model ship surface impedance of the ferromagnetic slab that will be immersed in a constant magnetic field oriented parallel to the surface that somehow will bring about a reduction in the reflection of microwave energy from a steel body. AAG. People might not realize that some of the inspiration of the replication effort originated the 1994 publication entitled Tesla's Egg of Columbus, Radar Stealth, Torsion Tensor, Philadelphia Experiment by Dr. James Coram, and printed in the Tesla Arcs and Sparks group. Can we give us a bit of, this sounds like a coffee group. Can we give us a bit of background into what kind of experiment Coram was proposing? Okay. Picture of a power supply up there, close up of the high output power supply to drive a resonant coil system. I think that's probably John's, it looks like. All right, Million. In the Tesla's egg paper you're referencing, Coram points out a number of statements made by Dr. Tesla which indicate that he was using resonator fields and transmission line modes. As a PhD electrical engineer, Dr. James F. Coram looked at the Philadelphia experiment through the critical eyes of a scientist. In the late 1970s, he recorded a team of scientists for fun to see if there were any scientific basis for the description of events that occurred during the Philadelphia experiment as expressed in the book, The Philadelphia Experiment by Berlitz and Moore. Much to everybody's astonishment, there was. 1994, at the Tesla Symposium in Colorado Springs, he, along with his brother K.L. Coram, PhD, and JFX Down, PhD, presented their findings in a paper titled Tesla's Egg of Columbus, Radar Stealth, and Torsion Tensor, the Philadelphia Experiment. They were in a laboratory able to replicate radar invisibility with their Egg of Columbus apparatus. Their initial conclusion was as follows, in emphasis, yellow. The analysis would appear to lend credence to the hypothesis that something more than mythology is involved. Mythology. And it renders plausible to the conclusion that sufficient motivation exists to actually conduct a Philadelphia experiment to examine radar stealth on ships with electric drives. Independent of whether our assumed values are practical or not, the analysis on the next page, independent of whether analysis is practical or not, our analysis uses no phenomenology that wasn't known subsequent to 1938. Would probably have brought World War II naval investigators to the point of radar stealth experiment. In fact, it would have been derelict behavior for the Defense Science Research Board not to have conducted such experiments if it were aware of the phenomenology as it must have been in 1943. Such an approach to stealth, however, is impractical and certainly would be of little interest as such to the military today. This, in quotes, this paper is, as he says, to serve as a basis of discussion for critical, not skeptical, scientific thinking. Okay. Scientific about the possibilities of scientific explanation for the events surrounding the Philadelphia experiment. He asked other scientists to review his team's work and provide critical feedback. Number one, when he speaks of tuning his apparatus until Hertzian radiations have been eliminated, he's referring to using ELF vibrations. In quotes, the Hertzian effect has gradually been reduced through the lowering of frequency. Number two, the energy received does not diminish with the square of the distance, as it should, since the Hertzian radiation propagates in the hemisphere. Number three, apparently detected resonator or standing wave modes. My discovery of the wonderful law governing the movement of electricity through the globe, the projection of the wavelengths measured along the surface on the Earth's diameter or axis of symmetry, are all equal. Okay. Number four, we're living in a conducting globe surrounded by a thin layer of insulating air, above which is a rarefied conducting atmosphere. The Hertz waves represent energy which is radiated and unrecoverable. The current energy, on the other hand, is preserved and can be recovered. theoretically at least, in its entirety. Okay. So Dr. Coram points out the last sentence seems to indicate that Tesla's Colorado Springs experiments could be properly interpreted as characteristic of a wave guide probe in a cavity resonator.
Mm.
Yeah, this was in fact what led Dr. Tesla to report a measurement, which to this day is not understood. It has led many to erroneously assume that he was dealing with faster than light velocities. Wave guide probe. My God, he set up a soliton. Faster than light, nonlinear. Yeah, faster than light velocities. Nonlinearity is what they detected, I'm guessing. As I understand things, Coram had originally read the Philadelphia experiment by William Moore and found the physics astonishingly believable, which says a lot given that Coram is one of the few electrical engineers with any real experience involving Einstein's unified field theory, proposed by Moore as the physics behind the experiment. In Tesla's egg, Coram claims to have already replicated this on a small scale in 1994, and I'm wondering what your successful replication might say about the original 1940s experiment. Million, we're fully confident that we'll achieve 100% success in replicating the 1940s experiment. Okay. Next page. AAG, there's a part of me that wonders about how much of the Philadelphia experiment this validates. After all, Coram had proposed some very elaborate physics as being involved with the original Philadelphia experiment, but his 1994 replication seems to have involved simple impedance matching between a block of iron and the surrounding air,
Wow.
making the iron invisible to radar.
That's really important. I should have highlighted that one too.
Yes. Is the replication that you're undertaking going to validate the actual physics underlying the anomaly of the Philadelphia experiment? Or is it mostly to support the notion that the 1940s era electrical engineer would have had reason to attempt the experiment as a project for producing naval radar invisibility? Question. Million, Tim, we expect to prove the following that would complement Dr. Coram's experiment in the following way. RCS, radar cross-section modification. In order to obtain very large currents from a modest power supply, we will tail our toroidal steel core as a radar target simulating the ship's hull and use an 8 kilovolt 10 pico
Microfarad.
yeah,
Microfarad.
capacitor discharged through the windings, which were arranged in series. The surge current would appear to be on the order of 35 amps, which would imply a peak magnetic field strength of the 17.5 kiloteslas per meter. I don't know what the A is.
Killer amps.
Mhm.
Well, kiloamps per Tesla meter, I guess is what the
Killer
notation's
Tesla
messed.
meter.
Yeah,
Killer
there's
amp
something
Tesla
messed.
meter, whatever.
Yeah, something messed up with it. The transformer core will be illuminated broadside to the donut with a small pyramidal horn-mounted Raytheon X-band Klystron blah, 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 11.98 gigahertz microwave transmitter, and the radar backscatter will be observed with an HP X-band crystal detector shown in figure A. A distinct difference between magnetic bias on and bias off target backscatter was observed.
Mm.
A distinct difference between magnetic bias on and bias off target backscatter was observed. All right. Got a good experiment. Brine displacement. We immersed the coil in a bottom of a plastic tub of water and rock salt. The coil was energized. The water flew out of the tub, literally. At low power, and the apparatus placed outside and under the tub, salt water in the tub swirls around. Vortex. Coram's concluding remark. Clearly, with up to 4.5 megawatts available, eddy currents in salt water would not only burrow out a hull-shaped hole in the water, but would probably levitate the ship somewhat.
Wow. So eddy currents, right? Very important.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so
Do you want to read that
there's
bit
a
there?
there's a little inset there showing the transmission apparatus, coil apparatus, pulse. The radar signature would disappear from the scope. Pulsed, critical word there. All right, AAG. In this case, we're going to take things a step further than Quorum did. What you said in the past, you're planning on putting together a scale model destroyer made from the same materials that the algae you have composed from. Can you tell us a bit about the scale model? Million. Again, the scale model ship was approximately 1/50th scale. They had destroyed yesterday. The algae, the following dimensions will be as follows. All right, so this is just space.
Page 7. We're nearly there. We've got 10 pages, I think. 9 or 10.
Yeah.
9 or 10.
Length will be 6 feet roughly. Beam will be 0.736 feet.
Yep.
And the draft will be about 1/4 of an inch. All right. AEG, there's been speculation that one aspect of the Philadelphia experiment that may have caused the anomalous results could have been bismuth used in the hull welds, which might have acted as a condenser. Yeah, bismuth wound. Here we go with the bismuth wound coils, which might have acted as a condenser to enhance unified field theory effects, much like a transformer core focuses a magnetic field.
Mm-hmm.
Is your model Eldridge going to use bismuth in any way? Million, this is something we're currently working on. I want to incorporate bismuth because we want to use an electrical fuse property as well. Bismuth occurs in a native state. Bismuth is the most diamagnetic of all metals, dipoles, and the thermal conductivity is lower than any metal except mercury. It has a high electrical resistance and has the highest Hall effect of any metal, i.e. the greatest increase in electrical resistance when placed in a magnetic field. The other interesting facet of bismuth, Tim, is that bismanol is a permanent magnet of high coercive force made of manganese bismuth by the U.S. Naval Surface Weapons Center.
Wow.
Manganese bismuth, yeah. Bismuth expands 3.32% on solidification. No shit, it's oxidic, like ice. Holy shit, it's a negative Poisson's ratio. Bismuth expands 3.32% on solidification. This is just a handful of materials in the whole universe that do that. This property makes bismuth alloys particularly suited to the making of sharp castings of objects subject to damage by high temperatures. With other metals such as tin, cadmium, etc., bismuth forms low melting alloys which are extensively used for safety devices and fire detection and extinguishing systems. Bismuth is used in producing malleable irons and is finding use as a catalyst for making acrylic fibers. When bismuth is heated in air, it burns with a blue flame, forming yellow fumes of the oxide. The metal is also used for thermal coupling as a thermal coupling material and has found application as a carrier for U-235, uranium-235, 233 fuel in nuclear reactors. My God, it has super forces. Okay, in terms of implementation, Quorum's calculations indicated that you need to pass around 15,000 amps through a magnetic field coil in order to produce the required radar invisibility effect.
Wow, that's a big clue right there, right?
Yes, in this case, the only way to achieve that was with a deep discharge capacitor and spark gap system to create a megawatt pulse. And the subsequent radar invisibility effect lasted only seconds. Are you going to attempt the same thing in pulse mode? And does the notion that the Navy might have tried this in continuous mode indicate that this gets easier to achieve with larger scale equipment? And that's a good question. All right. He's questioning the scalability.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we will try it. A whole variety of alternatives options come to mind here. We can use polyphase system to drive multiple or segmented bias coils. In yellow, we might also use saddle coils, which provide better homogeneity of the RF in the area of interest and are used as volume coils, unlike surface coils. Paired saddle coils are used for the X and Y gradient coils. By running current in opposite direction, the two halves of the gradient coil, magnetic field is made stronger near one and weaker near the other. It could be used for biasing the hull and for stealth under a variety of incident RF polarizations. So it's dynamic. It can tune itself. Cool. AAG, what kind of radar are you going to use for the experiment? In the Tesla's eggs, Corin talked about using X-band radar in the test. He thought it would be easier to spoof the older K-band radar systems of the 1940s. More importantly, how do you plan on tracking telemetry for the experiment? Can it be repeated several times to ensure accurate results? Million. The radar systems we're using will both be in the high-frequency X-band category. We are planning to have a storage oscilloscope for capturing critical waveform frequency versus time, plus lots of video and imaging storage hardware as well. We're going to bring a lot of other measurement equipment as well to try to capture as much data as possible, given the importance of the experiment. AAG, now in terms of other equipment, are you planning on adding anything to this experiment that hasn't been seen in the past? Any new twists on the experiment itself, or just a straight through shot at a perfect replication? Million, for the primary experiment, we're planning to conduct just a straight through shot, but I'm planning on secondary block system currently under development, which I'll describe in greater detail another time. AEG, conducting the experiment at John Hutchinson's residence isn't a mistake, right? I mean, the reports of the Hutchinson effect and the Philadelphia experiment are similar enough that many of us have reason for the same underlying effect. Would you agree? Would you agree with this? And if so, what do you think this means? Tim, we will have to wait to actually see what happens in John's place. AAG, do you plan on using any of Hutchinson's equipment in the experiment, or perhaps as a follow-up experiment if the first one is successful? Million. Tim, both John's present equipment and some of my custom equipment will be used for this first shot in August of 2006. AAG, do you now you do a lot of TV through Ghost Hunters, and Hutchinson does a lot of TV in general. Also, since American Anti-Gravity is going to be present for this experiment, it looks like we might have a lot of potential media interest. Any thoughts on the kind of publicity this might get and what this might mean for the experiment? Million, we hope a new series of shows occurs, especially especially for the advancement of individual scientific research. All right. AAG again. So if this experiment works, my understanding is that you're going to see a dip in the radar signature of the scale model battleship. The RCS should basically be attenuated, cross-section. Do you expect to see any of the results, or is this going to be primarily an equipment-based success based on the telemetry alone? Million. Tim, both RF reflections dips as well as hopefully transparency of the model structure in various portions of the metal. What are some of the things that could go wrong with this experiment? AEG again asking. I'd like to address these now because you're well aware the critics of watching as you use a simple experiment or calculation error as proof that a concept is unworkable. The experiment doesn't work. Any thoughts on how easily most errors might be corrected? If the experiment doesn't work, any thoughts on how easily most errors might be corrected? And are you planning on bringing any equipment spares in case something fails at the last minute? Million, very good question. I certainly hope the equipment parameters don't lead us to inconclusive or negative results. But even Quorum's replication only tested a small part of the claims associated with the Hutchinson effect. And let's face it, in the last 60 years, the equipment's changed a lot. Entire paradigms in electronics have changed, evolved, and been discarded in favor of newer technology. The other alternative is simply to locate original equipment manufactured naval equipment from the 1940s to try and stay true to the original Philadelphia experiment technology. But there's never been a complete description of what they were using ever published. Plus, if they work diligently to locate genuine 1940s era technology, the parts are still expected to have suffered from old age and neglect. We're planning to do some dry runs first. I have various metal samples that I'm going to ship to John Hutchinson within the next 2 weeks for various types of pre-testing calibration. The answer to your other questions is to have some system backup spare is absolutely yes. AAG. All things considered, in yellow. All things considered, if this experiment works, I guess that it best demonstrates that the 1940s era electrical engineers would have at least had the notion that they could make a ship radar invisible using degaussing coils, which is the real basis for William Moore's hypothesis in the Philadelphia experiment. What kind of credibility will an experimental result bring to the original legend? And do you expect to touch off a renewed interest in the Philadelphia experiment as a result? Million, if the experiment works as planned, we have effectively shown that these early attempts at radar stealth were based on feasible, scalable ideas that certainly lend support to both Quorum's experimental replication and the original Philadelphia experiment. In yellow, Marshall's experiments demonstrated that reflected light from an object could be refracted in such a way as to create a mirage. This mirage would render that object transparent or invisible, a feat based on the statements made by an anonymous scientist who was given the cover name of Dr. Reinhardt by William Moore. Moore interviewed Reinhardt, who had met Allende, but gave the eccentric the false name of Franklin Reno, derived from a road sign describing the distance from Franklin to Reno, Pennsylvania. Reinhardt claimed to have been one of the men who worked on some of the calculations for the Philadelphia experiment and provided detailed scientific data to a point. Marshall determined that if this data made no sense, did not check out, then the whole story would lose much credibility. Using the standard scientific method, Marshall carefully read Reinhardt's account and researched each scientific detail. Next page. In yellow, the core notion begins with the science that science requires using an intense electromagnetic field to create a mirage effect of invisibility by refracting light. This light would be refracted by the conditions caused in the air by the field that would include dielectric breakdown of the air, ionization, and even a zemanizing of the atom.
Like the Zeeman effect, I think it's called.
Yeah, zemanizing of the atoms. Wow. Not having the equipment to cause such conditions, Marshall calculated that if he could find a material that would refract light, he could at least prove whether or not the basis for the Philadelphia experiment had any foundation in science. As fate would have it, he did have such material, a special plastic called diffraction film, and he discovered, much to his amazement, that it worked. Yeah. AAG, the legend of the Philadelphia experiment, has always supported the notion that strange side effects of the Philadelphia experiment were unintended consequences of poorly understood unified field theory physics. And while Quorum suggested that these UFT effects required megawatts to generate, the Hutchinson effect would seem to suggest otherwise.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's, in yellow, I'm wondering if there's the potential for seeing something truly strange during the experiment, and what our thoughts on this possibility might be. Million. Now you can understand why we're all so excited. We're going to have to wait and see what happens, especially in terms of what's going on once with the Hutchinson effect in full power mode. AAG, let's close with some follow-up information. In between now and the scheduled August test period, are you going to be maintaining a record of your progress and setting the experiment online? Second question, where can the public track the progress that you're making on this? I guess that the best place for updates are our 3 websites. AmericanAntigravity.com, John Hutchinson's official site, number 2, and finally, My Global Communication Network's homepage.
Homepage.
De Leon is
I
PhD
think
electric.
I think the Eldridge must be one of the most famous ships in the world. You think so?
Yeah.
Can you think of another name of a ship besides the Eldridge?
The Titanic.
Titanic, yeah, Titanic is probably it. Anyway,
Maybe
so
that iceberg.
So,
Maybe that
yeah,
iceberg story was false.
maybe read that little last part about Dr. Ron.
read the last part again. He's saying
He didn't
Yeah,
read the
he was
last
with
part.
BAE. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's with BAE. Um, as a project manager in communications, nav, recon, identification systems. And he's got a contact there.
Yeah. Now, I don't know. I don't think this experiment happened. I'm not sure exactly what happened. It'd be cool to talk to John about this. I believe that Ron is no longer with us from some of the emails that John had sent. Does anyone else, like Alan, do you know much more about all of this, or have you heard of this before?
Heard of what?
The replication, their
Oh,
idea
no,
to,
no, I've never heard of this replication. Sorry.
The attempt, yeah, in
yeah,
2000.
But I do have a question, which no
yeah,
one, I've never seen anybody address this. If you know someone who has, let me know. The real spectacular part of this is the teleportation to Norfolk, Virginia. And I want to know if there's any evidence or even any indication at all that there was some type of apparatus in Norfolk that was set up to guide the ship there, because it seems like pretty random teleportation without it.
right. That is a good point. So it's sort of like a transmitter and then receiver on the other side is what you're thinking about, kind
Yeah,
of.
some kind of witness at the other end. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that one. I do know what I saw. I did see part of the actual military footage of the Philadelphia experiment. I do remember the green mist. That was one thing I can remember when I was 12. And my father took me, he was part of NORAD, and I don't know how we watched that, but that's what we watched. Um, yeah, it would be really cool to know more about this, because this is Tim Ventura too, that from APEC essentially, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know, I knew Al Bielek very much
yeah,
and
exactly.
Duncan Cameron.
Yep.
And I never heard either one of them mention anything about any apparatus in Norfolk, but they might not know of it.
Yeah, exactly. So one thing I can comment on a little bit, when we had Chris Beskar in the group at one point or in an interview or something, we were talking about the business wound dielectric, and he got really, his voice changed, and I've known him for a long time now. I've never heard his voice change like that. He got really excited about what he was talking about. So I think that the bismuth part of this is really important to the teleportation part, because Chris had said that, you know, if we want to really be out there like 15 billion light years away from here, then we need to look at this bismuth wound dielectric solenoid. So maybe we need to look at it some more in this group essentially too, right?
Well,
Definitely.
I think it's got to do with standing waves, even directly analogous to Tesla's standing waves, or
Yeah.
what were they called? Yeah, they were called.
He used phase conjugation basically to set up, like you said, a standing wave. It's basically a solar.
Oh, I was trying to think of the other term. Stationary waves, I think, was Tesla's preference.
Yeah.
Columnar waves too when they lined up. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And now that Paul's here, I was at Paul's laboratory a couple days ago, and we actually talked about recreating this experiment. So that would be really cool. But we found out that there's a model. I wonder who knows where that model is.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If you can get an actual model of the ship itself, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, this one was supposed to have been 6 feet long, and I mean, John would probably know, right?
Yeah, that's pretty big. I've seen some videos of John's with the smaller ship in the water, and the water's dancing around in that.
Oh,
But I've never seen anything where they did a big scale model like that.
Yeah, because I really don't know if this whole thing occurred or not. I know they planned it,
Right.
and I'm pretty sure that Ron is not with us anymore from some of the emails that John had sent.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's very, very interesting stuff. And again, going back to the bismuth wound dielectric solenoid, and Chris Beskar getting so excited when we were talking about teleportation
Yeah.
specifically, right? So what do you think about that, Paul?
Well, bismuth's an amazing element. I mean, because it's the most diamagnetic element on the periodic table, and so many things. There was a guy that actually did a presentation on APEC last week. I don't know if you saw it, but he did a talk on bismuth,
Oh,
and
wow, cool.
yeah, and basically
Who
said
gave the
there's all.
talk, Paul?
I don't recall his name,
Oh,
but it's on APEC last week, and it was an excellent presentation because he said there's so many
Yeah, I saw that.
unexplored avenues with bismuth, and I agree for sure. I
Here
know
it
the
is.
Russians were doing, when you take a disc and you put magnets and bismuth in a disc and spin it, all kinds of strange anomalies happen.
Cool.
do you remember the description of the stuff they scraped off the desert floor at Roswell and in other places?
Yeah, no,
Well, even Skinwalker Ranch.
yeah,
Remember they're digging around in that drilling the side of the mountain and pull that. It's a metamaterial of bismuth,
yeah,
stacked honeycomb of bismuth materials. So intercalated or intercalated bismuth, magnesium, bismuth, whatever.
right.
And you create this massive honeycomb, which supposedly, according to Skinwalker guys, it's the outer surface of a ship or some damn thing.
Yeah,
So yeah, it is amazing, and they found it at Roswell. Didn't know what it was, but
yeah. And the
uh,
density changes in opposite direction in the being solid and liquid.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
Well,
wow.
it's
it,
crazy.
there's only like I said, there's only a handful of materials that are oxidic in nature that have a negative Poisson's ratio.
Yeah,
Water is one, right?
water.
The
Yeah,
most
yeah,
well-known substance of all,
yeah.
and so
But
negative
metals
Poisson's
don't
ratio. Yeah,
don't
when
do
you
that.
pull it, it gets fat, and when you squeeze it, it gets skinny. It's
Yeah,
ass backwards of the whole universe.
right.
And those kind of materials are very, very interesting.
Yeah, and it can be converted from completely diamagnetic to totally magnetic as well. So
Yeah,
there's a lot to bismuth that we have.
magic. There's some magic going on. Yeah,
Right out of the box.
very cool. Yeah, so this is a really kind of interesting. Again, I don't know if they actually went through and did the experiment the way they were talking about or not. Um, we'll have to ask John because he would know the whole history of it all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
very cool. But it'd be really, yeah, really cool to try it and to be able to find that model. It is quite big. Like, I think we need something smaller,
yeah,
right? But they talked about having bismuth welds within the material of the hull is what this just talked about, right? So that's kind of interesting too.
yeah.
I don't remember that part. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah,
What
you
was
get
the
you
name
get
of the alleged superconductor that was bismuth, magnesium, zinc, vapor deposition, micron thin layers? I know that's associated with the UAPs, but there's supposedly somebody has created something that has at least some of the characteristics of a superconductor at room temperature.
Right. Um, I know of different materials of doing it. I know that the FRR 24 receiver, for example, is very, very high purity aluminum. And what they did is they mixed mercury in and created these microchannels. And the actual chassis of that FRR is supposedly superconductive. Um, that's one thing. I also do know that when Chris Beskar and I were talking about how to shield EVOs for doing research in laboratories, that this material that he developed or DARPA developed that he's using called titanium diboride is very important in shielding, but he also kind of laid a clue in there that it might be a room temperature superconductor too. So yeah, there's some some interesting things, yeah, happening with all of that stuff. Yep. Cool. Does anyone else have comment? We shut the recording off at some point here, or guys have anything else to
Okay.
add?
Yeah, okay. We can shut the recording off. Okay, thank you everyone. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Cheers. Bye.
Yeah.